Morning and welcome to this week's live show with Avero. I'm Avi. I'm the founder and CEO at Avero Advisors. We are an independent third-party consulting firm that focuses on local governments and helping them modernize their operations through selecting the best technology suitable to them or through better strategy and definitely business process redesign. Um, we go live every Wednesday around the same time, if possible, and this event will then turn into podcasts and blog posts and all kinds of wonderful stuff we produce here at Avero in an effort to educate our clients and prospects on how to think about digital transformation, modernization, and how to cut through the noise in the industry. Everyone's trying to sell you the next big thing, and we're here in your corner to help you identify what's best for your organization. And one of those big items that a lot of our clients want to modernize on is enterprise asset management. And we'll talk about what that means, what it includes, what it doesn't, what the connecting points or integration should be. But before we get into all of that, I want to introduce a very special guest today. Caleb Cruz is an associate consultant with Avero and one of the sharpest people I know. So, Caleb, welcome to the live stream and tell us
Thanks,
a little bit
Avi.
about yourself.
It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Caleb Cruz. I am from Maryville College here in Tennessee. I have a major in neuroscience with a minor in data analysis. Um, I came to Avero as soon as I got out of Maryville College. Started working with some housing authorities, some local counties, some larger cities, etc. Yeah.
Awesome. So, neuroscience, and I know you played football.
Yep.
Um, how do those two things connect to what you're doing at Avero? That doesn't make sense to someone that's just watching from the outside. You're a smart dude. Neuroscience, consulting for technologies. Tell me the connection.
Yeah, so the way I like to imagine it is every single client that I would say we work with, in order for them to get their main goal through, they're basically like a big brain. Every single department that works together is basically like neurons connecting. So I always envision it like that. Some people coming from different backgrounds might see it a different way, but that's just what I use in order to help me, especially in my day to day.
Excellent. So, I know you've been working on several kinds of projects and clients. You've done work with public safety, city governments, county governments, public housing authorities, transit agencies. And now you're working with a very large county in the US on a Workday implementation that includes enterprise asset management. Now, we know Workday partners with different agencies and companies to bring that capability into their ecosystem. And uh, you're working with CityWorks on this implementation, right? And what
Mhm.
we want to talk about today is number one, what EAM is, because we talk about ERPs all day. And enterprise asset management is part of ERP. Now ERP depends on how you define it, right?
Mhm.
It's
Correct.
enterprise resource planning for the whole organization. And depending on what kind of organization you're running, asset management is a huge part. Now, take, for example, the county that you're doing this for. They manage roads, they manage buildings, they manage sometimes airports, they manage police stations and schools. These are very capital intensive assets that these organizations need to use, keep up with, and treat financially through depreciation, additional additions to it, keeping track of the fair value, and then reporting back to whichever agency that's interested that may have funded the expansion or whatnot. And so keeping track of those assets is such a crucial element. And within that, you have things like, if you're repairing a building, who's working on it?
Mhm.
What kind of materials did we buy? Do we have the
Mhm.
inventory? Do we have to go out to RFP to buy a certain thing? Do we have inventory management? All of that comes into play that we don't often talk about in terms of ERP and the context behind it.
Mhm.
So tell me the story of this project in general. Like, what are you trying to accomplish through this? I know this is a we're not going to name the county, but it's like 6,000 employees, lots of moving parts,
Very large.
legacy system that is super customized, and then I'm sure there's a lot of um, workarounds and spreadsheets that are used for just keeping up with the assets in this community. So tell us a quick story about what the project is and what we're doing on that.
Yeah, so basically, this county had released an RFP because they were trying to get off of their legacy system,
Hmm.
SAP. They SAP served them well for quite a while. However, there were still a lot of processes that were quite heavy manual processes, processes that ended up being siloed on personal computers, processes that are just outdated. So they asked for a consultant to come in. That consultant group was us. There is now 5 or 6 vendors in total. Some of them have been changing a little bit, but there are multiple vendors now. We have an ERP system with Workday. We are doing a GIS focused EAM with CityWorks, and then we have some of our minor vendors like a POS system, and then stuff for reconciliation, and then stuff for compliance. Um, so with that, we are now at the phase of implementation. So we're having to implement not only Workday, but we're having to implement CityWorks.
Hmm.
CityWorks is going to have to be able to integrate with Workday to be able to send any of basically what you said, how you nailed it on the head. Labor cost, whether it is time that's been spent by an employee doing that labor, or whether it is um, asset
Yeah,
management, preventative
inventory.
maintenance,
Yeah.
corrective
Hmm.
maintenance. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, all good. And I think the it's important now to talk about the life cycle of an asset. And those of us like me that are accounting nerds, you need to think about how an asset came to be, right? I know it's a building today, but it started somewhere as a project where
Mhm,
you approve the budget for it, you approve the design for it, and then you had to go buy services like architecture and contractors, and you had to actually buy the nuts and bolts and the bricks for it.
mhm,
So there's a huge component of asset management that isn't just work orders, right? Yes, you
mhm,
have an asset today that you're working on that I'm going to send Caleb out to fix the leaky roof on this thing, and therefore I need to track Caleb's um, time on the project, his labor rate, his in some cases union rules that are very different for different trades within an organization. And now you're talking about integrating not just with the purchasing system, but also the HR, the payroll system, um, union contract management system, if there is one. And so the integration points out of EAM and into EAM are tremendously complicated for a large deployment like this. So tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing on that front.
yeah, so for integrations, basically, we're getting together with the team from the ERP system and then the team from the EAM system. We're having a sit down, trying to figure out all the requirements that are needed by the county. That can come either from the ERP's team's knowledge, the EAM team's knowledge, but also the county themselves. So, with the workers being 40 hours a week, every week, they know their system inside and out. They'll have they'll have experts for each system that works. So somebody who, might have been with the company or the organization for 20 plus years, they're going to know how that system works. We're basically trying to gather all of those requirements, make sure they're all documented, get them in one area, and try to start working on them, because it's basically like an elephant. The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's one integration at a time, especially for the ERP side. We see multiple hundreds of integrations. With the EAM side, it's a little bit shorter because the EAM isn't having to speak to the rest of the software systems,
Hmm.
whereas the ERP is having to connect to everything.
Yeah.
So it can be quite a daunting process, something that you really should plan for super early as possible, and to have a really, really solid and tight plan for that.
So what's been the most complicated integration out of EAM so far?
I would say the most complicated integration so far would definitely have to be, there's an old system that they use that wasn't technically with their ERP. It was kind of like a homegrown system. They're
Hmm.
really dependent on that. Being able to get that dependency withdrawn from them, and try to move their dependency to using just the EAM and the ERP rather than that homegrown system. That kind of integration Since it's not really an ERP to EAM directly, it's a ERP to a middleman to an EAM.
Hmm.
Um, it can get kind of hazy in there, especially whenever the people who originally created that system maybe no longer work at that county. Maybe
Yeah.
it's super old and you have maybe an outdated SOP. But yeah,
What is that process like? Why is it that unique and specialized? What
I would say
function is it that we're trying to replace?
so we're trying to replace it is basically SAP, their old ERP system, couldn't do certain reporting needs. So in order to fix those reporting needs, they had to go and create their own system.
Mm.
Being able to lasso that back into their ERP system or their EAM, that's why it's difficult because they're so used to it being in a proprietary system that was created by somebody who doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah, and that's such a good point because when we do modernization projects on ERP or EAM, it's very easy to overlook those micro products and the microservices, right?
Mhm,
You've had, let's just say SAP or Tyler for 20 plus years. And because these are major products, they don't necessarily, unless you get into super customization with those products, they're not going to solve every problem for you. Now, what's happened over the last 20, 30 years is people, organizations have had smart people within their organizations that understand the data and the workflows. And so they build their own product to
mhm,
support the workflow. And when you're replacing a 20 plus year system, you have to, in your assessment phase, in your requirements definition phase, keep track of these microservices because
mhm.
it's not one to one. You're not going to find something that is super custom built for your organization in a modern SaaS system. Can they do it? Sure. It's going to cost you
Money,
time and
yeah.
money
Mhm,
and customization, which traditionally is a bad word. So
mhm.
let's take a couple of questions, and those of you joining us, jump in the chat box, tell us where you're calling from or watching from, and any questions you might have. So I'm going to take one from Clay. Hi, Clay. What does GIS have to do with EAM? What a great question. You said GIS based EAM system. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, GIS stands for Geographic Information System.
Hmm.
Basically, the way I like to imagine GIS is if you're looking at Apple Maps, Google Maps, that in and of itself could be classified as a possible GIS. It's a little bit more on the navigation side, whereas GIS is more of gathering assets and putting them on a map. But it is an interactable map. So GIS would be assets like roads, bridges, culverts, manholes. All of that stuff is being maintained by a county, so it's
Hmm.
getting accounted for in a GIS database. That GIS database needs to then interface with your EAM so that whenever the EAM has a map function like CityWorks, that map function can then pull all of that data from the GIS in order to be able to provide it for the end user.
So it's essentially Google Maps ish,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
a map that you've inserted your assets on, and it's got layers because if you're working for the utilities, you don't want to see the public works assets
mm-mm,
necessarily. You
mm-mm,
could, but what's important to you should be able to should be really accessible to you. So you're building layers within Esri, which is the
mm-hmm,
predominantly used
mm-hmm,
GIS platform,
mm-hmm.
um, with your assets, and that in itself is a project, right? So
Mm.
when on this project of yours, was the GIS layer and that those assets already built in, or is that a different component of going to a modern EAM system?
So the county already had a GIS system. They had a GIS database. The only problem was that is that some of those asset hierarchies were severely outdated. Some of them still are, and we are having to work through that. That's
Hmm.
another thing that especially consultants and implementers should be on the lookout for is
Right.
asset hierarchies. GIS asset hierarchies are super important because from my point of view, if you have a client who has an outdated asset hierarchy and they're getting
Hmm.
ready to switch to a brand new ERP system, that's going to require new workflows that they might not be used to. If those workflows are tainted by a poorly put together asset hierarchy, it's going to be confusing for the end user, and user adoption is going to end up being negatively received.
So what comes first? It's kind of like a chicken and egg situation, right? Do you build your GIS? independently of an EAM deployment, or is that connected? Do we have to do this together?
I think your options could be fluid. I think if you are a well-maintained county, you should always strive to always have your asset hierarchies well kept, because eventually, and what we've seen is it could end up costing you money in the long run, especially whenever you need to transition to a new system. Um, I would say for everybody, it's not going to be the same. For some, it's going to come. We need to do our asset hierarchies and redo them, make them better before we implement. And some, it's going to be, dang, we're in a position where now we need to update them. Otherwise, our project's going to get pushed and go live might get pushed. More money is going to be needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could end up being a slippery slope.
Well, and it's such an important piece of an EAM solution, modern EAM solution. You want it to be geospatial. You want it to be searchable on a map because you're on a large county project like that or a transit project. Your assets are dispersed. They're not in one building. They're not
Hmm.
in two buildings.
Hmm.
They're dispersed across
A county.
thousands of miles of county.
Yeah.
And so keeping track of it on an Excel sheet or a table is really, really not useful, right? As
Hmm.
a manager of these assets, you have to be able to see geospatially, number one, where these assets are on the
Hmm.
in your county, and two, what else is going on, right? So now you have to interface with the utility company, the gas company, the telecom companies, because they all have assets deployed within your
Yeah.
county.
Hmm.
And so there is a lot of regions that do regional GIS because interfacing with other agencies that have assets within your county is so important.
Hmm.
How is that being handled on your project, if at all?
Um, could you give me another example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, like if I'm running AV County,
Hmm.
right? My assets are roads. I
Hmm.
don't have a utility. I have school buildings. I have sheriff's offices.
Hmm.
But then there's also the gas company in town, let's just say KUB, that has
Hmm.
assets in my region.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I'm planning for my GIS, I need to be able to see other companies and other organizations' assets. And what I'm trying to get to is there some kind of regional planning for GIS in that county? Or or do they have their own assets and that's it within this GIS platform?
Yeah, so from this county's perspective, they really only have their own. The way it's split up is mainly by the departments that are underneath that county. So, for
Hmm.
example, like a DES, DOT that do have assets that are
Yes.
either vertical or linear. We don't see too many of other departments or groups
Hmm.
around that county, but we have had heard word of maybe airport, maybe sheriff. They could end up putting their assets into the GIS that's getting adopted right now.
Right.
Um, but yeah, we don't see too many different groups coming in so far right now.
Okay. All right. Let's take some more questions. That was a good one because yeah, it's such an important thing. Okay. David asks, how important is mobile access in modern EAM systems?
Well, I mean, it depends. Do you want your end users to be able to actually be in the field while they're doing their work orders or they're investigating a service request or while they're doing preventative maintenance? If you don't, then I guess it's not important for that county. But in my opinion, it's highly important. And not even mobile, but even by phone, but even mobile by tablet. Just
Yeah.
having a tablet in a car, having a laptop in a truck,
Hmm.
while we have our end users out in the field. I think you can't be a modern EAM system today and not have mobile access.
100%. Because you need to contrast that with how things were done before, right?
Mhm,
In a non-modernized EAM environment where a worker would go into like an operations center or a central location to go see what work was assigned, what work orders have been assigned to you. You would go look into a big book and say, okay, I accept this, I'm going to
mhm,
go. And then you stuff your vehicle with the parts you think you need and you head out. In a
mhm,
large county, you're maybe driving for 45 minutes to get there.
mhm.
And when you get there, you realize, oh, the job wasn't described well, the
Mhm.
location's not right, or I
Right.
don't have the tools and the equipment. So what do I do now? I have to call some other crew to come meet me or go back and forth. And it just spends a lot of time on
Mhm,
that. So with a modern EAM system, you're looking at this on a tablet going, again, if it's geospatially managed,
Mhm. Yeah.
GIS is involved, you're looking exactly where you're going. It's got all of the asset information built in, pictures, videos, how-tos, and then you're completely educated on what you're trying to go do. And then you can leave with all of your equipment. You can have uh, great insights into what you're about to be getting into.
Mhm. For
And
sure.
yeah, and you can't do that without mobility,
Mm-mm.
right? So tablets, phones, built-in system, right? Some agencies have MDTs that are inside their public works vehicles that show all of this information.
Mhm.
What's being deployed at this county that you're working on?
Yeah, so this county will end up using, their main concern was that they wanna make sure that their tablets are functional with the GIS system,
Hmm.
so it hasn't necessarily been a problem for this implementer, which has been good, so I think, yeah, they will end up getting, mobile access through either an iPad, a phone, or just a laptop that's currently in one of their trucks or cars.
Got it. All right. Next question's from Jacob. Have you always worked in EAM? If not, how did you get caught up on EAM functions?
So, no, I have not always worked with EAMs, I would say the way to get caught up, on how EAM functions is just putting your feet in, just jumping in, relying on not only your superiors that do have experience with it, but also just being adaptable. EAM isn't always going to be a stagnant idea. It's going to continue to evolve. And us being consultants, we're adaptable. We have a bias for action. We're always constantly learning. So being able to do that is going to make sure that you understand the functionality of EAMs, especially as they continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah. And then Thomas asking a great question. You mentioned predictive maintenance. Could you explain what this term is and how it may relate to any EAM system?
Yeah. So one of the core functions of an EAM system is being able to give the end user an ability to be able to predictively maintain and upkeep their assets. So for an asset, it could be like fleet maintenance, whether it's a truck, a car, a van, a tow truck, um, a wire truck that's up in telephone poles,
Hmm.
fixing and repairing wires. Those are all going to have different maintenance schedules on them. With a EAM like CityWorks can allow them to have set schedules of when a notification needs to pop, when a crew needs to go back out to fix something, whether it's a light fixture or a street sign. These all have different maintenance schedules that all need to be put on an overall schedule.
Right.
So predictive maintenance is just going to make sure that you're staying on top of that as a county and you're not always doing reactive workflows. You're doing predictive workflows, so you're staying efficient, you're keeping money tight, rather than reactive. You could end up being late. You could have a light post that's controlling traffic and it could end up going out on you because you weren't predictive enough and could cause an accident. Like people's lives could be in jeopardy
Yeah.
if stuff like predictive maintenance isn't available to them.
Yeah, and it's also planned maintenance, right? I think there's a difference between predictive and planned.
Hmm.
Predictive would be, I would imagine in today's world, AI enables some kind of predictive analytics telling you, hey, because of these weather conditions over the last 2 months, and we were expecting a heat wave, you might want to look at these particular roads. And I know several, pavement management companies that are doing great work on that
Hmm.
front. That's predictive. Planned maintenance is slightly different, where you mentioned fleet, like you have a truck, what needs to happen every certain amount of miles or hours put on that equipment to
Mhm,
keep it functioning and, to your point, not have it die during a job.
mhm.
So predictive versus planned maintenance is extremely important, as opposed to reactive maintenance, which happens, right? Things break,
Yeah.
but well-run asset management, asset-focused organizations have a great plan for keeping up with their not just repairs and maintenance, also the replacement. Because again,
Mhm,
wear and tear, you don't want to keep using the same things. But how do you know when something is about to require replacement completely?
mhm.
So all of that comes into play. Um, Next question is, Is EAM only for physical assets, or can it be used for digital ones too?
That's a good one. I would say in my experience so far with this county, I don't think we necessarily have too many digital assets. Most of them are going to be for DOT and DES, so all of it's going to be pretty much physical. Um, I mean, maybe you would consider fiber optic possibly digital with the fact that it is for internet and such, but other than
Hmm.
that, I don't think there's too much digital ones for at least my project.
Yeah, no, I think when we say EAM, we're really talking about physical assets. I
Yeah.
think digital assets, there's several other ways of doing that. It's not as complicated, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, all right, Megan's question: what's more challenging, selecting the right EAM system or preparing your data for it?
In my opinion, I don't think there's going to be too many counties in America right now that are prepared for a EAM implementation. I think these people work 40-hour week jobs. They aren't prepared to be able to sit down for a 3-year period and implement an entire EAM system with the ERP. Um, I would say it's more challenging to have your data always kept up and neat and tidy. I'd say selecting the right EAM system is always going to be part of your job whenever it comes time to implementing a new system. So I think that's always going to happen regardless. Is the county will end up selecting an EA system, hopefully with us the right EAM system. But preparing your data, I think, is going to definitely be the most challenging part.
Yeah, because moving from an older system, which, in many cases, to your point, there's not one system.
Mhm.
Some stuff is in Excel sheets, some's in Access databases, some is in a legacy system, some is in a homegrown solution that was built for a specific function. So
Mhm.
that's where data analysts and consultants come in the picture, where, you know, translating from that mess to a modern solution is a science and an art because you don't
Mhm.
want to bring on garbage data. Um, Especially today, data is everything. You do not want to bring in data that's not accurate, it's not in the right
Mhm.
format, that's gonna
Mhm.
not make your new systems useful. So
Mhm.
really have to think about all of that. Clay's question is, are there security concerns too with homegrown systems built on old database infrastructure?
I think there will always
Yeah.
be concerns whenever it comes to homegrown systems, especially I would say in our case, with it being an older homegrown system, as the cybersphere is always evolving, there's always going to be new ways of cybercrime.
Hmm.
I think it's something that's ever evolving. You're never really going to be ahead of that. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be able to do things that you don't want them to do in your system, and it can be pretty scary. So I think there definitely are security systems, security concerns with homegrown systems.
Yeah, and it's not the system itself, right? It's the overall infrastructure. Like
Mhm,
security is not one thing. It's several things layered on top of each other. So one
mhm,
of the things you need to look at is if you're going to keep a certain homegrown customized system around to do a specific function, you better make sure that A, within the software, it doesn't have any bugs that would break it, but also when it's interfacing with your major systems, major ERP systems, that security protocols are established and followed all the time. When should an organization start thinking about an EAM?
Hmm. You know, AV, you have a lot of experience with this. What do you think would honestly be the the best time for somebody to start thinking about this?
Well, the old saying is there's no real good time to do any of this,
Mhm,
right? But
mhm,
I think it's in the sequencing. So why
mhm,
do people do ERP projects that include EAM systems, and sometimes they only do EAM projects that don't
mhm,
include any financial or HR components? I think the biggest reason to do EAM first could be that your existing system is going out of support, or you're being held hostage by a specific vendor saying, "Hey, upgrade to our newest product, or we're going to pull the plug on this," which is, to me, it's not very good business. Um, So I think having an overall strategy for how all of the things fit. I'll give you an example. Another large project we're doing, it's an airport on the West Coast that has, I think, 100 plus different systems overall. And a big part of that, it's an airport, right? Asset
Mhm,
management is a huge component of
mhm,
managing an airport. And because their legacy EAM system is being sunset by the vendor, they are they're going to do it. They're going to do financials and EAM in parallel
mhm,
because there are so many dependencies between the two that have to be taken care of, that you cannot do them separately. So
mhm,
it really depends. Is the consultant answer? It depends on what the situation is, but the stock, like the general recommendation is that you do an overall assessment of
mhm,
all of the components, all the legacy systems, all of the spreadsheets, all of the data that's flowing through your organization, all of the workflows, and that will tell you what order to tackle this in.
mhm.
But when should you start thinking about it? It's at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
because
that's a
they're so related to each other.
I think that's a really good point. I think that whenever the dependencies become too great, to do it separately, that yeah, it should really be at the same time if you can handle it.
Yeah. Isaac's question is, do you need a big IT team to use and manage EAM software?
In my opinion, I would say you might want a bigger GIS team than IT because IT, I don't think necessarily will handle too much of the EAM as a whole because the EAM is being set up by the implementer. So I think the GIS team will definitely be a little bit more important than the IT team, but I'm not saying at all that IT isn't important by whatsoever. I just
Mhm.
think that having a GIS database that is neat, tidy, structured is going to be a lot more important than an IT help desk that's calling in tickets for the EAM whenever that EAM ticket system can be done with the implementer or people in those direct departments.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to define what IT will do,
Hmm.
right? During implementation, critically important because you need the
Hmm.
infrastructure, you need the connectivity, you need uh, prepping to go to the cloud because most of
Hmm.
our projects are going from on-prem to the cloud.
Yep.
And so it's really important to have IT lead all of those functions. To
Hmm.
use EAM, then it becomes a maintenance function, especially if you're moving to a software as a service
Hmm.
product, you've bought support from the vendor.
Hmm.
And so again, IT's job then becomes making sure the connectivity stays up, that cybersecurity is paramount, that you have
Hmm.
backups in place. So do you need a big IT team? Not necessarily. You need a good IT team
Yeah.
that that can handle a hybrid environment, which most of this is going to.
Hmm.
It's not all cloud. There's a lot of on-premise equipment that you need to stay on top of to make an on cloud SaaS product work
Yeah.
effectively.
Completely agree.
Let's see. Man, these questions are coming thick. Can you use EAM to track warranty information on assets?
I would say it's not technically a core function of the EAM. I would say definitely, however, though, if the county or your client wants to end up tracking warranty info, I think there are areas in which you can do so. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a core function again.
Yeah, because what warranty on what? You're not going to get a warranty
Hmm.
on a road
Yeah,
or a pipeline. You may from the manufacturers of the pipe,
yeah.
and so it depends on the asset and
Hmm.
what you're trying to track in there.
I would say
What?
maybe like a fleet, like a truck, a car. Maybe you have a warranty on that if
Yeah,
you're buying it through government grants or something like that.
yeah,
But like a road pipe, yeah, shouldn't have warranties on that.
yeah. So what's the one thing that makes EAM worth the investment?
I would say the ability to enable capital planning, whether it is that or also just having historical data analysis from all of your assets can not only help you plan for your future, but it can also help with funding. So if you need a way to exclaim that you need funding, and EAM, I know the price up front might be heavy, but the in the long run, the investment will be worth it because that's going to be your key and basically advocating for you and your departments. If you and your departments need something, but you feel like your own county isn't giving it to you, an EAM system will give you data that you can't miss. You can't like run away from that data. So I think that is what makes EAM definitely worth the investment.
Well, and also it's general stewardship, that these are public assets. And in a private company that's manufacturing logistics firm, you need to keep track of what you own, your
Mhm,
assets, what they're worth, when it's time to replace them. Accountants, we want to know the depreciation or additions to
mhm,
that asset, so they can have the accounting handled. And all of that leads to just efficient management of public funds or any kind of funds,
mhm,
because otherwise you're not managing these assets correctly. And what's cool about the modern platforms is that they're all GIS enabled, and you should take full advantage of that. If you don't have a good GIS strategy, you should have one, and we can
mhm.
help you with that, because it's such a foundational element of a modern enterprise asset management solution.
Mhm. I completely agree.
Yeah. Um, I think we have run through all of the questions. Thank you all for some great conversation here. Caleb, what other points should we be making before wrapping this up?
Our biggest take home, focus on change management. I think change management is what's honestly going to save a lot of projects. I think people don't often take change management serious enough.
Hmm.
I think we have an amazing change management expert here that's going to help make sure that our entire project stays aligned, whether that comes to training, SOPs, um, basically being the advocate for the end user. We deal a lot with decision makers, but you don't really get to hear the little guy a lot, especially in how large local governments can be. Multiple thousand employees, we really just deal with the decision makers, but change management is your advocate for your little guys.
And thanks for making that connection, because as we're talking about changing systems
Mhm.
and the way we do business, uh, you're also talking about changing people's lives that have done the same thing over and over again. They know exactly how to do it. Here comes Caleb with a new idea, um, and I think bridging that gap is critically important.
Mhm.
Um, I'm going to take one more question that just came in. How do AI and machine learning enhance asset lifecycle management in today's EAM solutions? Thank you, Michelle. Um, I think that there's a lot of potential applications of this, right? And because assets are data heavy, if managed correctly,
Mhm. Mhm.
you should be able to do things like predictive analytics and
Yeah.
repairs, and really have a good plan for your asset base. What sort of AI features are you seeing in the current deployment that you're doing?
So this time around, we're not seeing a lot of AI in this deployment. This project started in 2022, and I don't think we were ready just for how fast and how quick AI was going to uptake. I think in the future, though, you'll definitely start seeing machine learning whenever it comes to data analysis as well as data presentation for you decision makers.
Yeah.
But today, right now, currently, we don't see AI in this implementation.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be in the product, right? Once
Yeah,
you have the
correct.
data, once it's clean, once it's moved over, there's several third-party applications that can use that clean data
Mhm.
to do stuff like machine learning and predictive analytics.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's
so
where we can come in and give you the recommendations for those softwares and stuff.
absolutely.
But I think we have to end up having those conversations with those county leaders on whether or not they even want AI to begin with.
Hmm. Well, that's I think it's going to be inevitable, because why
Mhm.
wouldn't you? As long
Exactly.
as you have the right guardrails and the right environment for using it, I
Mhm.
think you need to take advantage of that.
I agree.
Well, Caleb, thank you for joining us today and enlightening the audience and me on enterprise asset management. Um, and the audience, thanks for tuning in. Once again, I'm AV. I'm the founder and CEO at Avero, an independent third-party consulting firm. We can help you if you're thinking of asset management, ERP, don't know where to begin. We can help you strategize and come up with a plan to implement modern solutions. So, with that, we will wrap for this week, but we will see you next Wednesday. And please go on our website, subscribe to our channels, and take advantage of all the great things we're putting out there for our clients. So thank you, Caleb.
Thank you,
Have a great
everybody.
week, and we'll see you